Hello friends, welcome to S. Kumar IS. So we were studying the political science series and we were in particular studying Karl Marx and uh, we were about to start the criticism of Karl Marx. Before that we completed the historical background, then we saw the basic base and superstructure model of Karl Marx, then the basic tenets, historical materialism, and we studied all these things. If you have some doubt in them, please do ask the question in the comment box. I personally will answer every question of yours. So now let's move to the criticism of Karl Marx and आज की कथा को बिना डिले के शुरू करते हैं. So the first criticism is that Marx actually basically was criticized across the spectrum. Even the Marxist scholars criticized him and non-Marxist also. So the basic reason was that Karl Marx's explanation of history, that was too deterministic. That was economic determinism. These are key terms. You should definitely use them for answer writing. And all the changes of the history, for all the changes of the history, he just gives the one reason. What is that one reason? Economic determinism. Economic determinism. That is the reason. That it means that he says basically that for every problem there is only one reason. And what is that reason? That reason is that economic structure is the basic structure, and those who control the basic structure, actually basic structure controls all the other superstructures. And what are the power parts of superstructure? Family, civil society, everything. Economic structure controls absolutely everything. He just do not think or talk about any other cause. That's why his explanation is monocausal explanation, and that's why he was criticized by both the Marxist and non-Marxist. So non-Marxist scholars criticize Max Weber is the most prominent among them. They says that Marx is monocausal. Marx's explanation of history is monocausal, and he gives all for all changes he gives economic reason, and he says that Protestant ethics, the Max Weber, he says that Protestant ethics led to capitalism in the book Protestant Ethics and Rise of Capitalism. He says economic reason is not the only reason. For example, Protestant, they say that God become happy if you conquer, God become happy if you expand, you become more productive. So these kind of factors are also there. So like Max Weber says that there are not only two classes but there are multiple classes. Marx ignored middle classes and subclasses in middle classes. So he just says only two classes. It's not like that. There are different classes. So that's what Max Weber says. Then the most paradoxically the most prominent critics of Marx are even Marxist, and they are not critics in the wrong sense. They just want to modify, they want to make Marx theory correct. Gramsci is called as the greatest disciple of Karl Marx. So Gramsci says that Marx ignored cultural and ideological factors. So Marx ignored these factors in his theory, and because ideology and culture also plays important role in shaping the history. That's why Gramsci also gives the concept of hegemony. Again, the next Marxist scholar, Althusser, he says that he criticized Marx for over-determinism of economic factor, and he gave the concept of multiple structures to counter the base superstructure model. Okay, so like he gives example that Russian Revolution started from political structure and not the economic structure. Like there was revolution does not mean that first of all some capitalist class has to exploit, and then after exploitation they will revolt against the owners. So he says that may be one explanation, but that's not the only explanation. All the revolutions does not happen like that. It is completely over determinism. And actually, every scholar, it's just a child of his time. So Marx, his goal was just the emancipation of working class. Goal of Karl Marx was emancipation of working class. Emancipation of working class is goal of Karl Marx. So that's what his basic motto was. So yes, definitely he was monocausal, but he was not unintentionally monocausal. He was intentionally monocausal. He wanted that only. It is also paradox. Marx is, what is the paradox? The paradox is that Marx is basically anti-intellectual. He says that intellectuals have intellectuals have always resulted into keeping workers have-nots. So he is basically anti-intellectual. He says to workers, do not trust the intellectuals. Don't trust them. He advises the workers. But at the same time, he himself is acting as intellectual. Marx himself is acting as intellectual. If he is not intellectual, then how he can give the theory of Marxism? So basically these all are paradoxes in the scholars, but they just want to achieve their end through their theories. That's it. So this is Althusser. Then determinist is a kind of negative connotation, that if some person gives theory, that is absolute. Nobody can modify it. So Marx says that his theory is scientific. He says scientific socialism. So that is too determinist. There is no scope for debate and modification. Then it is determinist means non-scientific and lacking the critical thinking. Then one more non-Marxist scholar, Karl Popper. I just forgot it here, so I mentioned it here. He criticizes Marx that he is too determinist, and like he has one book, The Open Society and Its Enemies. Spellings I have just write it informally. So the open societies and its enemies. In that book he says that Marx theory is not open for falsification. Falsification is what? Actually it is related to critical thinking. Falsification means something is open to be proved false or right. Like there is always scope for debate and there is always the scope for modulation, for to and fro. So Marx theory is not open for that falsification, and Marx is totalitarian. So like Karl Popper says that the open society and its enemies, so he put Karl Marx as enemy of the open society. Then neo-Marxist, like they focus more on the theory of alienation. He says that they say that theory of alienation is the main theory and not the historical materialism. Neo-Marxist, they say that Engels and Lenin, Mao, they projected it like that Marx's main theory is historical materialism. But that is not the main thing. The main goal, the core of Karl Marx is his theory of alienation. Why? Why alienation is core? Because ultimately the historical materialism, the total revolution, all these things are happening for what? For happening to end the alienation. Because in the state of communism, Karl Marx says that a man is completely free. And if a man is free, that means he has ended the alienation. So that's what the concept is. Karl Marx says all these things just to end the alienation. So they say that, neo-Marxists say that the main focus of Karl Marx is to end alienation. So the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, the book is there, in that he gives this concept of alienation. So this is the main concept, and Lenin, Mao, these they projected it differently. So like it is said that historical materialism as main theory is not the main theory of Karl Marx. So the next is that Marx method of studying the society, it is structural approach. I'm just using the keywords. I hope that no need to give complete theoretically, I should not dictate that much time is also not there, and I hope that you will understand it and put it in your own words, but keywords should be the same. In political science, keywords cannot be your own, they should be the words of the discipline. So Karl Marx, like his approach is called the structural approach. Why? Because structuralism in social science, it is influenced basically by science, and structural basic means scientific approach, like you build the structure, and it is something dealing with foundational, fundamental or basic. So Karl Marx, like, first of all identifies the base and superstructure model, and then he gives his theories very scientifically, like historical materialism, then dialectical materialism, then class struggle. So he put things quite fundamentally, and he uses basic fundamental foundational concepts, and then he builds his theory. That's why he is called structuralism. He tried to bring scientific rigor.